Well, welcome back to PacWest Bigfoot. This is David, and before we get started with the encounter story, um, I know for some of you this is going to be kind of harsh, and I just want to say I'm just going to be blunt about it real quick. My business has picked up so much over the last month and a half, and I have to say I jumped into another business with some friends and decided to run with that because it was just too unique and too awesome to pass up, for my family. So what has happened is that I have become extremely busy, very, very busy. And this is for my family, it's not for anything else. I have been here with PacWest Bigfoot for just about 2 years and about a month and a half from now. And I love you guys. I think you guys are awesome. And yes, I am not going to be able to do this on a weekly basis going forward. However, I'm not going to let go of PacWest Bigfoot for good. I am going to continue, creating, taking these encounters and stuff and turning them into awesome campfire-like stories for you guys here and there. However, I'm not going to be able to do this on a weekly basis anymore. I wish I could, but I just don't have that kind of time right now, at least not for the next 6 to 8 months. So it's something that kind of tore me up a little bit inside, but at the same time, I'm diving into something for my family and for myself, and it's just it's just a wonderful opportunity. So. Um, Suffice it to say, what I am going to do, however, is that I am going to at least try to get out a good story every month for you guys here, and I am going to put a collection of them into small little ebooks and Kindle for you. Um, that would be pretty cool. As a matter of fact, I might just load them onto a PDF and just give them to you straight from PacWest Bigfoot website if you guys would like. That's probably how I will do that. I will let you know when they're out and then give you a collection of stories and stuff like that. Other than that, yeah, I just, like I said, it's just, I'm really busy and trying to fit this in every single week over the last month and a half has just been a real struggle. And I don't want to, I don't want to diminish anything here. And I really enjoy it here. And I have to say, I mean, this is one of my favorite things to do, but work comes first. We all know that. Work and family first. I mean, those are just the things that happen. And being given the opportunity to do what I'm doing with the friends of mine and stuff, it's a great business. It's a great opportunity, and I just don't want to pass that up. So, with that, let's get into this week's Pac West Bigfoot encounter story. And here's the deal: look forward. Stay subscribed to YouTube channel. Look forward to it, but right around Halloween, I'll have another one out. Thanksgiving and Christmas, I'll have another one out. I will be doing some, and I'm going to try to get to them every single month. And here's the other deal: I've decided that when creating the campfire stories out of these real encounters and stuff, I'm going to try to go ahead and make them a little bit longer than they have been. This way, I get you guys can get some good stuff out of it. Okay, that's really it. I hope your fall is going wonderful. But let's get into this PacWest Bigfoot encounter story, shouted and harassed by Bigfoot near Patrick Creek in Northern California. It was 1991, and I was hiking through parts of Northern California near Patrick Creek when I was shadowed and even a bit harassed by a Bigfoot. I was on my first hike, something I wanted to turn into a profession more than just keeping it as a hobby. How I would do that was simple. Write a book and articles for outdoor magazines, something that was starting to boom back then, and start hiking a lot. But while I would not be able to achieve that dream due to something non-related to this encounter story, I did have a Bigfoot encounter in the Pacific Northwest, one that I thought I would finally share here. So thanks. 17 and free at last. My life is crazy. It's a crazy story, actually, and a testimony to the good Lord and the willingness to live, forgive, and grow. I was 17 and free, literally. I was emancipated from my stepmom and dad, who were lacking in the parental departments. To be honest, and I will keep it short, they were drug addicts, and I found myself stealing just to eat food sometimes. The day I was freed from them and free to live my life as an adult was a great day, and all thanks to one good friend, my uncle, who helped me through it all. He did let me, and I quote, rent from him a room. Well, the guest house he had on his property in Northern California. I was very lucky. I was a very lucky guy to have such a great uncle. I have to say, he was more like my dad at the end, and the reason I was set free from the craziness in the first place. He was also the reason for the newfound love I had and still have for hiking and the outdoors. Up until that point, I lived in the city, San Francisco, with two people and all their less than friendly so-called drug addict friends. Being out of the city and living in a smaller town and outside of it was really refreshing, and it really helped me get past, well, my past. My uncle also led me to the Lord, but I will stop there and get on to what is really out here in creation that many do not experience: hiking and Bigfoot. So, I had a newfound passion. Well, a few of them. But my faith and hiking were the most important to me, however. I worked for my uncle at a local outfitter store he owned. My aunt, I won't forget her either. She owned a salon in town that was thriving. But it was my uncle that got me into hiking and soon enough guiding people on hikes out and around the Northern California coastline. It was about a year after all this change in my life happened when my uncle trusted me enough to be out on my own hiking. So I planned a 4 night hike through a part of Northern California forest, in particular the Klamath National Forest. It would be day two in the Patrick Creek area when I would come across something that has even my uncle still scratching his older and grayer head today. I came across a very scary, large, and extremely harassing Bigfoot. Even today, my uncle believes I saw a Bigfoot, but it is hard for him to imagine it himself. But then again, it was for me before that moment as well. Personally speaking, I heard about the legend, the stories of Bigfoot, if you will, wandering the woods of the Pacific Northwest for a millennium, I suppose. I was never a true believer up to that point. Besides, I had bigger worries growing up until I was emancipated. Even after that, I was still working through trust issues and such, so I guess it was just something I never really believed in or had time to give serious thought to. But then again, who really does? Yeah, that's right, not many folks do. At least not until they are harassed by one, see or experience a Bigfoot for themselves. A hike of a lifetime. He knew it would be good for me, he mentioned, so my uncle helped me plan everything to the T when it came to the hike of my young life. I was to hit a pretty long trail, one that ran up through the Klamath National Forest and particularly through the dense forest and area of Patrick Creek. We'd been there several times camping at a nearby campground, and I love the creek fly fishing and just hiking around it. It really is beautiful there. And yes, today I still visit the area and with camera in hand. It was to be a great hike, one that would last a few or more nights, and I would be picked up at the meetup location on the fourth day. I would be a day early and basically out of breath when all this was said and done, with this hike of a lifetime. On the trail. Day one was great. I have to say my uncle was right. There was a lot to take in. I mean, the beauty and all. Creation has a way of explaining a lot of things, I suppose. That is, if you stop to smell the proverbial roses in it. I hiked all day the first day. I was just a small pup tent and pretty large backpack mostly full of food and a pot to cook it in so I could go pretty far without too many stops. I was going to truly be roughing it, and if I could, subsist a bit on what I could find and eat along the way. And I did. A ton of berries. And at one point, someone must have lived along this one particular unnamed creek, well, stream, because I came across an old foundation to a log cabin, it seemed, and had a few apple trees that were producing fruit near it. I grabbed 5 to 6 apples, put them in my bag, I remember. I can tell you this. It felt like a strange place. I mean, it felt, I guess it made me feel a little off or uncomfortable. I cannot tell you exactly why it was I was feeling it, but it was weird enough to get the apples and go. That was for sure. By the time I was a mile or so away, I felt better. The uneasiness left, and I was back to eating an apple and shadowing Patrick Creek by that point. I would stop at a campground that, at the time, was extremely primitive, to say the least. But it would be there that the weird feeling would start up again, and I would soon learn that I was being shadowed myself. Rock throwing is not natural. I camped just outside the camping area or zone. For me, it was not about being the loner rebel hiker. Simply put, I found a much more comfortable place to set up my tent, personally. Besides, being a loner was not that hard when nobody else was around. It was towards evening when I broke out my fishing pole, one of those small ones about 14 inches long, just enough to get a nice little trout or something and set to fishing for fun and food. Just below me, about 20 yards, was a pretty deep pool. It was funny, but I kept having my attention pulled over there as it seemed like either fish were jumping or pebbles or something was being thrown in it here and there. It was pebbles for sure. I kept my eye on the pool after about the third time. I looked over, and that is when I saw a small rock or something come flying out and hit the water from the opposite side of the creek of me. I immediately knew someone was around. As we all know, it was not a natural thing for bears, cougars, or any other known animal in the Pacific Northwest to throw rocks of any size. Someone had to be over there. So I gave a shout. Hey! Nothing. Just silence for a few seconds. Then I did it again. This time it sounded like some football players started running through the forest south of me, and then out of hearing distance. I was a bit bothered by the situation. I was alone, and someone ran off instead of revealing themselves. I mean, seriously, who does that, right? Right. But the rock throwing stopped, and I decided to hike a bit further out of the area. I had at least a couple hours till nightfall, plenty of time to get somewhere I felt better and safer about, at least. Something behind the tent. I finally settled in a few miles upstream. I set up camp, ate a couple apples, and read a book for a bit by firelight between 11 p.m. and midnight. I headed off to bed, and after all that extra hiking, I was asleep in minutes. And, what seemed minutes later, but was in fact an hour or so, I was woken by something behind my tent. At first I thought it was a raccoon, but I was pretty groggy for, there for a second until whatever it was literally slapped the back of the tent. I would have thought maybe the raccoon or whatever it was jumped and hit the side of it, but I watched what looked like a person's hand hit the side of it, and seconds later, as I did it again. Okay, maybe it was just swiping at it, but either way, it was hitting the tent, and it seemed like a pretty big hand. I shouted at whoever it was, and suddenly they literally walked off. Yeah, walking off in the dark. I was suddenly scared, as I heard what I'd heard earlier that evening or afternoon, the heavy footsteps walking off and almost crashing through the woods. I got up, grabbed my revolver, tucked it in my pants, and stoked the fire a bit. Nothing else happened the rest of the night, but I barely slept, and that was not going to help me the next day. The last day of this hike, basically. Name it Shadow Creek instead. Morning could not have come fast enough, even though I was really, really tired, almost exhausted, to be honest. I decided, however, to take a quick nap after breakfast instead of moving on. Besides, after packing up and moving on the night before, I was a bit ahead of the distance I wanted to reach each day. Eventually, I got going the second day, and it was not long before I uh, uh, would see something that would change my mind about what is out in the woods, the Pacific Northwest. I had stopped for a few to relieve myself and to check my direction. I was heading up creek, and I knew I would be turning off it soon. I was looking at my map and had my compass out when I heard something from across the creek. It was moving through the brush and trees. I could not tell what or who it might be at first, as all I could see was the dark shadows inside the tree line. But after my eyes focused a bit, I could see movement, a tall human-like shadow standing there. It was as still as a statue all of a sudden, but you could not help but make out and know it was a really tall person standing there. I was just staring, and I started feeling really creeped out. Whoever this was just standing there quietly, not even trying to say anything to me or communicate in any way other than stare. I packed everything up as quick as I could and started back to hiking out of there. And whatever that was across the creek, to my surprise, it started walking or shadowing me as well. I was getting really hot, and I was moving pretty fast. My goal was to hit the old logging road not far away, start heading southwest on it until I could find someone I could catch a ride with and just get out of there. I had to stop for a moment to get some water, and that is when I would be charged and screamed at by Bigfoot, a true and scary monster I never for a second thought really and truly existed. It was like a Mack truck just crashing through the forest just opposite the creek from me. I tumbled backwards, dropping everything and landing on my backpack, which hurt my back quite a bit, actually. Nothing, but nothing mattered at that moment because after a second or two, I watched as a nearly 9 foot tall, massive ape like looking monster covered in long black hair came crashing through the trees and brush and almost into the water. It was slightly hunched at the waist, and its arms were long. I was so close enough to see it had long and nasty fingernails, and its face was actually half covered in hair, and the rest a dark grayish skin tone. Like a great ape, but with a more human-like nose and eyes that seemed to be black and then reflect red in the sunlight. It was hot, like I said, and I was close enough to see this thing was also a bit sweaty and damp around the upper part of its face, too. I did not move, not even a second later when this thing opened what seemed like a small slit of a mouth that turned out to be big enough, I swear, to bite me in half, and it screamed at me. And it was a scream that some have said they never wanted to hear again, and I agree. I agree today with a massive amount of fear in my heart. It lasted a few more seconds and went right through me as if I was standing inches away from 10 lions all roaring in unison at me. However, this was a Bigfoot, something I'd no idea about. Not its behavior or apparently its temperament. I finally got the guts up enough to stand up, turn, and run for my life. I knew I was less than a mile from an old logging road, but all the way that Bigfoot followed me, screaming, huffing, and even growling and barking at me. I hit the road inside 25 minutes and never looked back. Today I'm still hiking. My uncle was surprised to hear me calling so early, and from some stranger's home the next day. It actually took me 5 hours alone of walking before I came across an older couple who lived way out there. I did not tell them exactly what happened. I just told them I needed to get hold of my uncle. My own uncle came out to get me, and they could not have gotten there fast enough. The longer I waited there, the more it seemed the old couple wanted to know what happened. I guess I could have told them, but I was still processing everything as I sat there on their porch the rest of the day and into the early evening and slept outside. I still hike, and it took me no more than a couple months to get back out there, out of the shop and back onto the trail. And yes, my uncle and aunt believe me. And yes, I am always armed now when I'm out hiking. But that's my encounter story. Thanks, Aaron.